Good morning. It'll just be a moment before we get started. We'll get started in just a moment. Yes, quite a few people have enjoyed The Bad Robot. It is pretty iconic to a certain degree. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Thanks for joining me again this week. I hope everyone has enjoyed the much needed rain and, of course, some surprising hail that we've seen this week. This is the 52nd installment of my virtual office hour address. People continue to say that they appreciate these live stream events and hearing from their mayor on a weekly basis. We've just about reached that year. And the live stream event is really good because it allows me to give you some updates, answer some of your questions, and of course, just provide some general words of encouragement. So thank you for allowing me to continue to represent you to work for Sunnyvale during, ever-changing times. I hope everyone is doing well, staying healthy. Please remember take care of yourself both mentally and physically. These are difficult times. Staying at home. Some of us are starting to get the vaccine. I'm still waiting. My wife is still waiting, but it does seem to be helping. Continue to follow the county health orders. Do your part to stop the spread of the virus. Wash your hands. Don't touch your face. Reduce the number of people that you come in contact with. Maintain safe social distance when you're out, and of course, wear your mask. And get your vaccination when it's your time. So all those are very, very important. We've now reached 361 days, almost exactly a year, after the March 16th county health order started the shelter in place in an attempt to slow the virus. And since that declaration, a lot has happened. A lot happens, it seems like, every day. And, I have daily press conferences to watch, seminars to attend, conference calls to confer, and really advocate on Sunnyvale and your behalf. So let's go ahead and talk about what's happened at the federal, state, county, and city level over the last 2 weeks. Last Monday, Governor Newsom announced that he and state legislators had reached an agreement to push the school districts to open classrooms to the youngest students by the end of March. And this was about an $8 billion school reopening agreement that it stopped short of requiring requirements regarding vaccines and collective bargaining, and it doesn't require schools to open, but it offers financial incentives for those that do. And so the proposal would offer $2 billion in grants to schools that open transitional kindergarten through second grade by the end of March, and bring back, of course, at-risk students in all grades. And that includes, counties that are in the state's purple tier, but the majority of us have now moved, of course, into the red tier. And, with infection rates so high, teacher unions had previously said that it was too unsafe to reopen. There's been a lot of work in the last 2 weeks, of course, on that. But the bill allowed, hybrid schools to qualify for instructional grants, large districts to basically get more money, as long as they're bringing students back for at least 2 days a week. So this is an ongoing, negotiation, and as school districts continue to plan for that. And so, I've been talking to our superintendents, our school board members on what their local plans are, and that continues to move forward. It's a lot of planning, a lot of, logistics, what additional measures need to be put in place. But it's a humongous task, but and they're really, working hard on that right now. And of course that incentive from a state standpoint, makes it a little bit easier to deal with all the additional costs of reopening right now. And then last Tuesday, as expected, the state declared that Santa Clara County had finally met the requirements to transition from the purple tier to the red tier. And and then of course, last Tuesday afternoon, county health officials basically said that they would align with the state's framework as opposed to a lot of our local measures, beginning effective Wednesday, March 3rd. And so those changes basically allowed all activities that were allowed in the state's red tier, including indoor dining, state capacity limits and all that based upon state as opposed to local definitions. And then it also removed the mandatory directive on travel. So that was one of the big things, that as far as how long you needed to stay at home after you traveled more than 150 miles. So, and then last Tuesday evening, Sunnyvale City Council met, and we had a special study session on the Moffett Park specific plan. And so this was the third of three meetings, and it was specifically on market conditions, land use, housing, and open space at Moffett Park. And it was a really good meeting. It was talking about, how we not just add office space, but how we add, conceivably housing and retail into Moffett. It's an area of opportunity. It's actually a really big opportunity to transform Moffett Park with the kind of eco-innovation districts where you drive to and you can walk to businesses, you can be in your home, you can walk to offices, you can have a lot of open green space, sustainable development, placemaking. There are a lot of good things. There's talk of like the 20-minute neighborhood where the people that live there, or you drive there, you can walk to pretty much everything that you need within 20 minutes. So this is a very positive sort of plan. The need, of course, is still to maintain a certain amount of industrial and flexible space, not just have big campuses, but have a mixture of big and small businesses. So there are a lot. So that was like more than a 3-hour meeting. First with a presentation on what the plans are, then moving on to public input, and then going on to council questions and direction. So if you want to watch that or any of the 3 meetings, you can go to moffittparksp.com, and there's also a current survey there, and I'll be putting that survey out onto the feed just so that people have a better idea. They can give their feedback on what they would like to see in Moffett Park. It's also, has really good presentations. I think staff is kind of laid out, all the potential issues and some of the positive things about adding additional resources into Moffett Park. And then last Wednesday, as expected, the Santa Clara County officially moved into the red tier, and so that allowed for indoor dining, and that was very positive. It's like I've a lot of the restaurants, not all, that have been wanting to have indoor dining can now have indoor dining up to 25%. And so so moving the red tier means indoor dining up to 25% or 100 people. Retail stores now have a maximum of a 50% capacity. Gyms and fitness centers are at a 10% capacity. Movie theaters have a maximum of 25% capacity and or 100 people. And definitely, AMC opened last weekend. Museums and zoos have also a 25% indoor capacity. So we are seeing a lot more activity. Still, everyone is wear your mask, be careful, be safe. But especially with the number of people getting vaccines, the risk is definitely dropping. And then last Thursday, Governor Newsom was in Stockton, and he had yet another plan concerning vaccine distribution. So his last big addition was 10% of all vaccines would be going to teachers, trying to get the teachers vaccinated by the end of March, early April. But his latest plan was talking about setting aside 40% of the state vaccine doses for people who live in neighborhoods that are most vulnerable to the impacts of the pandemic. And so this was the state setting aside 400 vulnerable zip codes, and definitely they overlap with certain neighborhoods with higher populations of blacks, Latinos, Asians, and Pacific Islanders. But ultimately, it would mean that we would end up getting even though the Bay Area has and especially Santa Clara County, it's like 20. We have about 20% of the population of the state. We would end up getting about 2% of the vaccines, and so 2% of the 2% of the vaccines going to the Bay Area, to me, just didn't seem to be correct. There's been a lot of issues from that standpoint that Blue Shield basically the governor saying that Blue Shield should be in charge of all vaccine distribution, to me has some issues. And we'll talk a little bit about a press conference that happened yesterday a little bit later, but I do think that has some conflict of interest, and also for counties like ours, which have been doing a fantastic job of getting vaccines out there. To me it's a little short-sighted from a state standpoint. And then this week, on Tuesday, Governor Newsom had his State of the State address, and definitely wasn't normal. Normally it would be in the Capitol building, and it would be in front of our state legislators, and not really that many people would have seen it. This year it was in Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles, with 56,000 empty seats in the background. So it was to represent the number of people that California, almost 56,000 at this point, that we lost due to COVID-19. That being said, it was to me a big, almost a political rally sort of thing, political speech. The governor normally talks about policy at that and what's going to be done in the next year. This was mainly, the governor painting a very rosy picture about the future of the state and the vaccine rollout. And he didn't specifically reference the recall, but a lot of this is in response to the recall efforts, which have now passed, I think, about 2 million signatures. So almost assuredly there will be a recall election in early fall. But the governor basically laid out that we have went through. It's been a very difficult year, and that has been very true. And looking at what we've done, with masks, with finally getting vaccines out there, vaccinations to the most needy, what we've done for eviction moratoriums and getting food and rent relief to those that need it. It's been a very big effort around the state, and the governor does definitely take credit for that. There was some comments about humility, and I had some questions about how humble the governor might be. Humility hasn't been really one of his things, but I do appreciate where we stand, at least from trying to get vaccines out. One of the things that the governor continues to tout is, based upon compared to all the countries around the world. I think we're, our state alone has distributed about where I think would place us as number 6 in the number of vaccines that we have distributed. That being said, based upon population and a state standpoint, we're more in the middle. So as far as number of people that have been vaccinated in our state versus our population, I think we're ranking around 27, 28, something about that. So we'll see where that goes. And then on Wednesday, at a federal level, the House passed the COVID relief package finally. And so this has been a long time coming. This provides stimulus checks, direct payments worth about $1,400 per person, that will reach about 90% of households. And then depending upon how much the household makes, that amount will go down. And then there will be unemployment assistance, so $300 federal boost to the weekly jobless payments, that are extended through September 6th. Aid to states and municipalities, and this was a big thing that we've been asking for. For the May care package that was approved, our city got none. Cities under 250,000 didn't get anything, and that was made it very difficult. And so I've been doing lots of advocating over the last 8 months, 9 months, trying to make sure that whatever care package, whatever COVID relief package is passed, our city ends up getting something. And and I think it's fair because all of our cities have been hit. We don't have as much revenue. We've had to buy lots of PPE or and lots of equipment for depending upon like plexiglass at different counters, receptionist counters, all of that. There's been a lot of extra efforts being done and lots of lost revenue. So I thought it was critical that whatever happened, that we would be getting what money regardless of the size of the city. And so ultimately this will mean about $29.5 million to Sunnyvale. And how we spend that, they're still early in the budget process, but that will be separated into kind of two tranches, half of it available in the next 6 months, and then half of it available next year. It is, we're still going through what the requirements are in reporting. We want to make sure that we're completely crystal clear on all those things before we spend any of that money. It's better, to not, overspend and not plan and then realize that you've misspent. So we'll see where that plan goes. But it was, music to my ears that stayed into the package. It was for direct relief to our city. And we've given lots of money out beyond, expenses, but we started the small business grant program, the Sunnyvale Cares program for small businesses and nonprofits. We've given almost $1 million to Sunnyvale Community Services for rent relief, for food, for utility payments, so for those people in need. So definitely, the federal funds were very critical as far as I was concerned. And then the bill also provides housing aid, provides tax credits for families, educational and child care. I think that was about $125 billion, and money for small businesses. So the bill provided $15 billion to emergency injury disaster loans, and also $25 billion for new grant programs specifically for restaurants and bars. So hopefully, that money rolls out, and we'll see how quickly it rolls out to the residents and to our businesses. But definitely, it's fantastic news. And I talked to our Congressmember Akana on Wednesday, and it was great to hear that he had fought for that local assistance. He was he'd already spoken on the House floor, and was going back later that afternoon to do the final vote. So it was actually really good from that standpoint to be able to talk to him on Wednesday, and then on Wednesday, of course, Governor Newsom had a press conference talking about a new color-coded tier that will be added to the state's reopening framework, and this is, he didn't give any details, and that should be released later today. But we currently have the purple, red, orange, and yellow tier. The green tier conceivably is completely open. When this was put in place early last year, the tiering system or summertime, the concept was, well, we don't know what green requirements would be, and some of those requirements have changed, but ultimately that should be released today, so we'll have more information on that. Yesterday, President Biden signed the COVID relief package, so that was, finally on his desk, and it's the 1.9 trillion dollar package is the biggest relief package ever produced, and it goes back to, it's something similar to FDR's efforts if you look at that. So if you kind of go back, that was probably the biggest, a similar package that went across businesses, went across relief for residents, tried to do job creation, so many things. Also yesterday, county health officials and of course electeds met for a press conference, and this was on the governor's, basically in the state's new plans regarding vaccine allocation, and going back to that 40%. And it was really a request to remove Santa Clara County and the Bay Area from the scope of the Blue Shield's vaccine distribution oversight, to do several things, and a lot of that is to avoid disruption to our local efforts. Already we're seeing that with Blue Shield taking over, conceivably we're not distributing as many vaccines locally as we were before. We've beefed up Levi's Stadium and lots of local sites where we can distribute those vaccines, and then to say, well, this is how many you're getting, but we're going to cut that in half or a third of what you were getting before, isn't really fair. And as we're even getting more vaccines into the state, and so based upon our demonstrated ability to carry out the vaccination management and administration, the Blue Shield arrangement is a solution in search of a problem from a Santa Clara County standpoint. Blue Shield's role also, as a private insurance provider, to me creates at a minimum the appearance of a conflict of interest, if not an actual conflict of interest. Blue Shield is a big donor to the governor's campaign, and so I think that counties that are able to do the right thing shouldn't be inhibited and shouldn't be controlled by this outside insurance company. So that being said, we'll see. There were a lot of letters written in the last few days. There are a lot of press given. We'll see how well the state actually listens to our requests. But I appreciate our state legislators. Senator Cortese, Becker, multiple of our assembly members, Mark Berman, Evan Lowe, others working to try to make sure that we get our fair share, our residents, get vaccinated and get their fair share of the vaccines, and ultimately, that helps us pivot and recover, because we're really important to the economy, and the concept that well, it'd be one thing if we weren't distributing those vaccines as quickly as we could, but we are. So that to me was not really, that was fairly short-sighted from the governor. Let's go ahead and get to the health dashboard and where we stand on testing and vaccinations. From a national standpoint, we've now surpassed 29 million cases. but that's only up about 400,000 in the last week. So we've dramatically dropped the number of new COVID-19 cases. And then we've surpassed about 98 million people vaccinated. So we're number one in the world as far as nations that have vaccinated the most people. From a California standpoint, we've had about 3.5 million positive cases, and we've had about 55,000 fatalities. So almost enough to fill, Dodger Stadium, as the governor was saying. And on a positive note, California has about 11 million vaccinated. So that's really positive. And then from a county standpoint, we're now over 112,000 people vaccinated, or 112,000 vaccinated, 112,000 people that have tested positive for the virus. That being said, it's only up about 1,100 people from last week, which is way down from 2,000 a month ago and about 7,000 2 months ago. So definitely we're seeing, a very positive trend as far as that's concerned. We currently have 143 people hospitalized due to COVID. That's way down from just 180 last week, but 300 about a month ago, and 400 or 500 a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. By the city, Santa Clara, so San Jose has had over 74,000 new 74,000 people test from positive of COVID-19. That's only up about 700 in the last week, and so that's way down from 2,000 to 3,000 just a month and a half ago. And then Sunnyvale has had 45 new cases, and we're at 51, almost 5,200 people. So we're way down from the 150, 200 that we had about a month and a half, 2 months ago. So things are looking very positive, and I continue to do a lot of advocating on our city's behalf at the national level. This week was a very big week. I was at National League of Cities. I spent a lot of time, learning about new programs and new possible funding sources and all the efforts at the federal level. But I talked with multiple of our federal representatives, our congressional leaders, Congressmember Khanna, Lofgren, Eshoo. I talked to staff from Senator Feinstein's office. Senator Feinstein rarely meets. It's always hard to meet your senators. For all the times that I've been to DC, definitely they're always the busy one, because it's two per state, and you have tons of representatives that are always wanting to meet with their senators. So we ended up with a meeting with a staff member, but I did talk to all of our congressional members from Congress from different areas around here. I also met with the FAA, and we constantly talk about airplane noise and what can be done. There not much change there as far as that's concerned, but continuing to do the airplane noise roundtable and having those discussions. At least they're hearing us and working on some of the dispersal issues with the next gen system. At a county level, I continue to have our weekly discussions with county health. I talked about the press conference that we had yesterday. And then as for testing, the mobile county pop-up van continues to be coming to Murphy Park for testing. So they were here this past Monday, and they'll be back on Monday the 22nd from 9:30 to 4 p.m. for those that want to get tested. You can go to sccfreetest.org. And just as a reminder, if you want to get vaccinations, and we're trying to get vaccinations at the same site when the mobile van is actually going there for testing. But to get signed up for vaccinations, you can still go to sccfreevax.org. And next, I want to talk about some upcoming events. So tomorrow there will be a stop API hate rally at San Jose City Hall Rotunda at 11 a.m. to noon. And, there's been a continual rise in hate crimes against the Asian Pacific Islander community over the last year. And Assemblymember Lowe and San Jose City Councilmember Pam Foley partnered to show their support and kind of stand in solidarity against Asian violence and racism. And so it is, we had our hate crime in Sunnyvale against a Muslim community about 2 years ago, but I'm hearing, more and more South Bay, East Bay, San Francisco, and around the U.S. about violence, racism against the Asian community. And so this is a rally to basically put some focus on that, to stand in solidarity. If you're attending, please remember to wear your mask, your face covering, stay socially distanced. But it's important to put a light on this. It's not just to be a bystander. And there's been some positive events that we've had in neighboring communities, as far as people standing up when they see racism, when they're seeing violence. And so it is important to respect people, no matter what their beliefs, no matter what their backgrounds. And to me, that's important to be a part of the solution. To stand up for what's right is critical. And so that I'll be attending whether or not I speak. I think there's going to be a lot of people attending tomorrow, but it is an important focus, that if you see racism, if you see especially violence, standing up, calling in the police. I talked to our district attorney Rosen last night in an event, on a Zoom event, of course, and the number of hate crimes in Santa Clara County have risen from 1 or 2 a year over the last few years to 14 in the last year. So it's really difficult, and a lot of this has to do with the pandemic and some of the rhetoric at the national level that happened last year. But definitely this is an important issue that we really need to focus on. And then this upcoming Tuesday, council will meet on several things. One of which to me is really positive, is we're authorizing the city manager to execute 3 site agreements for the installation of electric vehicle fast charging stations. And so I think there will be 4 fast charging stations at each site, and they're city-owned property. And this is one of the big things that I've been pushing for, is trying to make sure that it's as easy as possible for people with electric cars to get charged. And so one will be the community center. One will be the downtown parking lot at West Evelyn and South Sunnyvale. And then, of course, the downtown parking lot on the corner of South Francis and Evelyn. So those kind of three locations are great locations. We have charging stations at the City Hall right now, at the Civic Center. But these are the first 3 that new kind of locations that we'll be doing. We'll also be looking, in the future at other city-owned property. And then one of the other things that we'll be doing is continuing discussions on the redistricting ordinance. So we gave a lot of direction in our last city council meeting, talking about defining what the ordinance was and making some decisions. This allows the staff to come back with that final language, and for council to do some more wordsmithing about that, what that ultimately looks like. Next Wednesday, the 17th, from starting at 7 p.m., Megan Weir, a transportation planner, will be giving will be part of the Sunnyvale Sustainable Speaker Series, and this will be she'll be speaking on clean, convenient transportation. And so this will be a kind of a lecture and question and answers on how we make clean and convenient transportation, how to support active transportation, biking, walking within our communities. transit access. It also cover, transit-oriented development, which is critical. It's what we have. What we try to do is make sure that, people can, walk from where they are or walk to public transit as much as possible. It'll cover street design and, other options for local travel. Let's go ahead and get to questions. Dale asked, is it true that many migrants who have crossed our southern border will be transported over here to NASA? I heard that on the news. So, I've been in contact with NASA prior to that announcement yesterday, but the Department of Health and Human Services requested federal agencies determine whether or not they currently have vacant properties that might be available and suitable, of course, for potential future use as temporary influx care facilities for, and specifically, unaccompanied migrant children. And so HHS and NASA Ames are currently coordinating a site assessment for some currently vacant property at Moffett Field. And, the HHS will then determine if certain facilities might be suitable to provide that temporary shelter space in the future. And so the efforts wouldn't have any effect. And so I've been, talking to our representatives at NASA. It would have no effect on NASA's ability to conduct primary missions, but ultimately, there's a certain amount of housing that is at Moffett Field that is usually used for interns, so student interns that work with NASA during the summertime. So that's what that's typically used for. And during COVID, that's been sitting idle for almost a year now because of COVID. And so conceivably, this is a reasonable location to use that. But we'll see, there's a lot of logistical efforts that need to be evaluated before any of that can be done. But definitely that is something that NASA and HHS is currently looking at. And I'll keep you updated as decisions are made. Next, this has been asked several times over the last few weeks. When is Dunkin' Donuts opening? And so definitely people are looking for happier times, and a lot of us from the Midwest, from the East Coast, have fond memories of Dunkin' Donuts. So Dunkin' officially opened this past Monday, so just 4 days ago, and they'll have their official grand opening early next week. But of course, grand openings aren't the same as they were pre-COVID, so things are a little bit calmer right now. But they officially opened this past Monday, open for business. They currently have another right next door, Mountain Mike's Pizza, and that opened just a week ago today. So they opened last Friday. So in that same shopping center, right near Maria and El Camino, just basically close to Wolf Road, but they're both open right now for business. And I've met the owners, the staff. It's actually a very both are fantastic. Mountain Mike's Pizza isn't doing indoor seating yet. They'll be opening that up in April, but currently they're turning out pizzas, and that owner's owned another location elsewhere and sold that to move to Sunnyvale. That was his dream, and so him and his wife are running that right now. So it's good to see new businesses open up in your city, and especially very popular. Lots of people interested in this. So, and they're also organizations that give back to their city. They sponsor kids sporting leagues and give back to nonprofits. So those are two somewhat changed to some degree, but they give back to their community. So that's opening is a very positive note from that standpoint. Several people asked again, when will a mass vaccination site open in Sunnyvale? Are there plans for pop-up mobile sites? So a lot of this has to do with vaccine availability. We were supposed to have, vaccinations at Columbia Neighborhood Center this past week. We were We were supposed to announce earlier this week. I've been talking with one of our high-tech companies to have basically vaccination site on site there in Peary Park, and because of the shortage of vaccines, none of that's been able to happen. And so, this is continuing to push the state level to say, what we can provide vaccines, just give them to us, and we'll get them to the people in need. So we'll see what happens. I've gotten this question in different forms from different parents, different residents. Many parents are currently very irate with the Sunnyvale Elementary School District's reopening plans in progress. I implore you to use whatever pressure or tactics available to bring about change in the Sunnyvale schools. I understand the mayor's office is separate, but the ongoing suffering being wrought against children is unacceptable. And I've been talking to the superintendents and school board members for a long period now. I've been attending their meetings, and I been hearing from parents, and it's not an easy solution. It's a very difficult solution to try to get all the measures in place. And so in talking to the school board members, they're looking at what they can do from a hybrid standpoint coming up in the next month or so, and then trying to get everyone back for full and basically full in person in the fall, and conceivably also summer school. So they're still defining all this, and I've heard this from Sunnyvale School District, I've heard this from Cupertino Union, Santa Clara. Sunnyvale is split between multiple school districts, and so there's depending upon what the school districts are, there's been a lot of push from the parents that they really want to see their kids back in school. Of course, there are similar parents that are saying that they want to stay hybrid. It's not an easy solution, but we do need to get our kids back in school, and I continue to apply pressure, apply an ear and suggestions and a partner if the school districts need it. From a city standpoint, there is that separation of city operation jurisdictions and the school districts. They are completely separately run, and that's always surprising to some people, but that is the case. How the school districts operate, how the city operates, are completely separate. And so in certain issues like the Lakewood Branch Library, sometimes we come together to do a common purpose effort, but how to get kids back in the schools is to a large degree in the hands of the school district. So but I will continue to work with them. I will continue to be your advocate, and then also looking for potential solutions. So thank you for that. People have asked what's happening with Fair Oaks Park unhoused. So there were about 20 people housed, more than 20 people in Fair Oaks Park parking lot. We're in the process of renovating Fair Oaks Park, putting in a Magical Bridge playground. The problem is where the majority of those people were in the parking lot of Fair Oaks Park is right where all the utility access is. So PG&E couldn't start any of its work from a renovation standpoint, and we tried to get the county to help. Ultimately, the county has been burdened because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and our shelter, our Sunnyvale shelter, has reduced. It has 175 beds and has been reduced to about 80 beds, and so none of the transitionary shelters had any availability. We finally said the only way to move forward is work with a nonprofit, since the county can't provide services, to deal with housing these residents in a hotel room, provide food, provide services, process their process their belongings, store them, all that, So it's been a big partnership, but we finally made progress in that about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. And so ultimately, they're being housed right now. I continue to spend a lot of time on this issue. I continue to work with Supervisor Lee on the concept of putting tiny homes on at our Hamlin shelter to see if we can, not house specifically the people that were at Fair Oaks Park there, but conceivably transition some of the families at the Hamlin shelter into transitionary housing. They're families with kids that would like additional, I'll say, privacy, which would be really critical. And so moving them into tiny homes and then freeing up a certain number of beds at the Hamlin shelter would be fantastic. So anyway, that to me is an ongoing effort. What we can do to house some of our unhoused people. We're just not building enough, affordable housing. I continue to work with Mid-Penn and a lot of our affordable housing nonprofits to build new housing developments here in Sunnyvale. We're continuing to work on this issue. Hopefully we can get a little more progress sometime soon. Let's see if we have any other questions. Let's see. Okay, several other questions. What will happen with the EV charging stations currently at City Hall during or after development? The EV charging stations at City Hall right now are close to the parks that's at the corner of Matilda, closer to the park at the corner of Matilda and El Camino. So it's basically at the gas station, the refueling station for city vehicles. So it actually isn't in the area where development is actually taking place. And you've seen a lot of photos on that development on my feed, on the city's feed. They're moving lots of trees in front of, along Olive, north of the current City Hall is where the new City Hall will be built. And so they've been, moving a lot of those trees out and replacing them to other locations on the Civic Center campus. You saw two camphor trees that weighed about 250,000 pounds. With the dirt and everything else, it's about a 60-foot canopy. They've been placed to new locations on the campus. Pretty impressive operation. But now all the trees between the current City Hall and Olive have been moved out, and ultimately they'll be starting to build, take the dirt out for underground parking, and then start building the campus itself. So ultimately, they'll build the new building, then they'll tear down the old building, tear down the Nova buildings across the street, and then they'll also get rid of the people, the city staff that are working in trailers right now. So all that will go away when the new City Hall is finally built. Let's see, any other quick questions as we're wrapping up? Yeah, there was a hate crime in Mountain View, and the lady was arrested. There's in talking to DA Rosen last night, there were several people that were going to be arraigned in the next few weeks on different occurrences that were actually different hate crimes that happened in our community, and not specifically Sunnyvale, but Los Altos had an incident, Mountain View had an incident, something happened I think in Campbell in the last few weeks. So yeah, it is a difficult problem from that standpoint. Let's go ahead and wrap up. As always, you can email me any other questions you have, or put them into the window and I'll respond. But thanks for joining me again this week. As always, I'm I'm proud of Sunnyvale's response to the pandemic. Life continues to be difficult for so many of us. New issues come up, but your actions, your response really do make a difference. Continue to wear your mask, continue to build community, to help others, especially during these difficult times. I'm proud of Sunnyvale residents really pulling together to help those in needs. Also, just giving away food, giving away, supplies. I always hear more about, um, even kind of creating toys on street for interactive events for kids that are just walking through neighborhoods. So if you're out on a walk, wave, say hello, from a safe social distance. Real people miss that social interaction, and hopefully we'll be able to meet in person soon. Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together, and we will get through this together. Thanks for listening, and until next week, have a safe and fun, but a very safe St. Patrick's Day. Continue to wear your mask. Take care, and have a safe week. See you. Bye.